and welcome to our June speaker spotlight. And we are moving into the weekend, and also this is the end of the financial year, so time just flies very quickly. So for those of you who have been on a journey, you would have realized that we have been on a journey of talking through a few topics in the past. So ranging from the recruiter spotlight, as well as hiring managers insider tips, as well as, sorry? I'll continue on. And then also some success spotlights from some of the people who have landed the job recently. While those tips are really vital and important, we know that career is also a mental game. So today we are doing something a little different. We'll focus heavily on mindset needed to navigate this uncertainty. We'll look at it through the lens of endurance and resilience, while still ensuring that you take away with the practical career strategies. And to help us do that, I'm very, very excited to introduce Martin Fletcher onto our speaker spotlight today. You'll be amazed by Martin's background. He's really extraordinary. I'm sure you've already seen the flyer, but let me repeat some of the things that he has done. Martin has rowed unsupportedly for 35 days across 5,000 kilometers of the Atlantic Ocean. He ran 6 marathons in 5 days across the Sahara Desert and swam 20 kilometers from Perth to Rottnest Island in WA, and many, many wilderness expeditions. I think when I look at that, it's just wow and amazing. And aside from the adventurous side of Martin, he's also the director of Fernway Partners, as well as Lumeira Search, specializing in placing the tech and project services talent across the financial services, health tech, and critical infrastructure sector, from junior talent all the way to C-suite. And had interviewed over 100 plus executives. So he knows exactly what decision makers look for. Are you very impressed now? So I'm very, very grateful that Jared actually connected us, Martin and I, and then Martin agreed to come and speak to us. So there's no one better than Martin talking about all these challenges of lessons learned that he had from those physical challenges, as well as bringing in all those practical career, job search, and the interview strategies for all of us that you need now. So whether you are currently navigating job search or you're proactively looking at what next in your career, today is about the time to shift your perspective, to lean in and listen in to Martin's adventures and also his advice. We'll also have some time for Q&A, so please pop your questions in the chat and I'll monitor that in the background. So with that, I would like to introduce Martin onto the virtual stage. So Martin, welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, let me just... It's nice and clear on the screen. So thank you again for joining us today. We're really grateful that you take out your time. I've done my best to introduce you, but I'm sure that everyone is really eager to hear from you directly. And could you introduce yourself and also give a taste of the journey that you will go through the oceans and deserts, and tell us how those extreme experiences connect to the professional services you provide today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Maria. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on this call with so many people. So yeah, my journey, well, I mean, I actually started my life as a software engineer and then went into consulting and a little bit of project delivery before. I have absolutely no idea why, probably because I was absolutely rubbish in both project delivery and software engineering, but found myself in executive search and recruitment. I think about 5 or 6 years ago, I found that I had quite a lot of barriers, and I think barriers that I'd probably put up myself as I was getting a bit older in my career. I was becoming definitely more risk adverse. I was becoming a lot more kind of linear in my thinking, and it took me probably longer than it should have done to realize a lot of the limitations that I was putting on myself, and I was kind of struggling really to find the next level in both my career and my life. And so I embarked on really what was a series of events with a similarly ordinary group of people, where we just ended up doing some pretty gnarly expeditions across the world. And we've been doing so whilst all trying to raise $1 million for mental health research. So we've been partnering with the Black Dog Institute, and we're about $750,000 into that fundraising target at the moment. But I think what it having adventurous pursuits, and one of the things that that has helped me is I've been able to bring back so much of what I've learned out there back into my professional life, and also how I approach not just my business, but how I advise my clients and advise my candidates on how to, best approach their careers as well. So it's really helped me in the kind of talent advisory and the career advisory space. But I'll say that if you've tuned in to listen to the inner workings of an elite athlete, you're going to be severely disappointed, because I'm a highly ordinary individual, and I'm not really much of a runner. I'm very slow, and I certainly wasn't a rower before we rode across the Atlantic.
Okay, I think you're being very humble because
Mm.
when I look at your amazing outfit, I can't even really imagine how you do that. So personally, I'm really, really impressed. So I don't know. I mean, people on the audience are very impressed as well. So I think probably we can learn a lot from your experience. What strikes us about most is about going into that direction of completely unknown, like what you're facing into. So for the audience today, we have two groups of people. So some of them are looking for the next opportunity because they have been, experiencing redundancy. But also there are also people on the line who are, just watching the volatile market because something might hit them in the future in terms of the career. So I'd like you to share about, what you talk a lot about mindset, but what is the right mindset, and what are the advice that you can give to the people who are in kind of both of this boat at the moment?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, really for me, I think that mindset is something that is, often understudied and overlooked when it comes to, navigating a career or moving jobs. Um, I think when you're going through the interview process, I think that mindset is way more important than people give credit to it, right? I think a lot of the advice when it comes to navigating the open job market is around how your CV looks, and, how many applications you're doing, and are you networking in the right places. But for me, I think a lot of what people aren't talking about is how to stay positive, how to present the best version of yourself at all times, right? I think also there's a lot to do with kind of how best to approach interviews, but also where to look and how to align yourself with the right people in order to give yourself, the best possible chance to get a job.
Yeah. Okay. And for people on the line, just let you know that you can ask questions as well. So you can put the questions in the chat. Katie, I just want to answer your questions because it's a Q&A style, so there's no slides, but we'll be summarizing the information at the end and post it in our community hub. Cool. All right. Then the next question is also, related to your extreme environment. So on paper, you had no business being. I think that's what I noticed in your LinkedIn profile. So for any one of us in the audience trying to pivot into a new industry where they feel like an outsider, how do you back your transferable skills and overcome that imposter syndrome? These questions actually get asked a lot in the past about like someone moving from one industry to another, and how do you actually identify the transferable skills? Yeah, do you
Yes.
have any
Yeah.
advice on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should also say that I think that these are really big topics, right? So I'll do my best to answer them in a sort of a bite-sized piece, but they're probably, it's something that I could talk for hours on, right? So, if anyone has any further questions that they want to follow up with, feel free to drop me a LinkedIn note, or we can talk about it in the Q&A session. But I think really for me, dealing with imposter syndrome when pivoting careers, putting yourself into a bigger role than maybe you feel like you're comfortable with. I think all of these things are very valid, right? And I don't think they should be dismissed. But I think the key here is two things. I think first and foremost, it's being your authentic self and having as many conversations with people as you possibly can. Because the one thing that I've noticed in my 20 years of working in executive recruitment, all the way down to graduates, is that absolutely everyone has felt imposter syndrome at some point in their career. Most people will experience it multiple times, and a significant proportion um, will they will experience it on almost a daily basis. So I think that the more we demystify that, the better, because the more people you ask outright, how do you feel? Have you ever felt this? The more you will realize that absolutely everyone is feeling it. And I think that there's power in demystifying it. One of the things that I've done when I lead expeditions, or when I've been on expeditions, which involves small groups of people spending very long periods of time together in very intense, high pressure, intimate environments. One of the things that we work on as much as we can is fostering environments of extreme honesty. So we do a lot of work with trying to get people to be as honest as they can and be their authentic selves, because once you have that, you can kind of break down a lot of the barriers. And I think that there's an emphasis on everyone here to articulate their insecurities and articulate the parts of their personality that they're vulnerable about, because you know fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. It's one of the sayings of our group, right? Fear, and this fear of expressing yourself, it can show up everywhere, but it really is just an inch deep, right? The moment you push on through and you actually take that step and you're brave and you express yourself, you actually realize that everyone's feeling exactly the same, and it's very liberating.
Yeah. I think talking about imposter syndrome, I also felt the same way when I started my current job. I think we feel that every day, especially I think especially at the start of the job, and also the more the people that I talk to, the more I felt that everyone is experiencing the same thing as well.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I
yeah.
also have I've got to probably choose my words carefully here, but there is the same proportion of high performing and low performing people at every rung of the ladder. I think that people just assume because you're a CEO or you're a CFO or you're a program director that you have your life together and you know what you're doing and you're a really good operator. But I've seen the good and the bad at every single level. And I don't think that just because you're talking to someone upwards or you're talking to someone new, you should assume that that person knows what they're doing.
Mm, so true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so we'll move on to the next one where we kind of this is what probably everyone is experiencing, especially for people who are navigating the job market at the moment. Every rejections, weeks of silence feel like rowing against a headwind. So, you're talking about rowing in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
So it drains your energy and it really kind of demotivated you. So while you're in the middle of the ocean, crossing and finishing line, or when you can't really see the finishing line, how do you manage that fatigue and keep your momentum going? And how can our audience today translate that into the endurance in the job hunt?
Yeah, I think it's a really important point, right? I mean, when we rode across the Atlantic Ocean, we rode in shifts of 2 hours on, 2 hours off, around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 5 straight weeks. Um, and it's almost too overwhelming to think about. It's a million strokes. It's just too big. And so I think it's like everything. I think it is you have to break it down, right? And I think it's too big. You have to break everything down, and you really just have to be present. I don't want to get too kind of ethereal, um, but I think that not trying to let yourself get sort of overwhelmed with the grandiosity of what you're dealing with, I think is a really important thing. Um, and I think really sort of maintaining perspective on the things that you can control and the things that you can't control. We'll talk about this later on, but one of the things that I really get people to think about is, number one, you can't take anything personally, right? In 20 years, I've heard every particular type of person that someone wants to hire. And the absolute truth is that on every assignment that I take, the manager has a very good idea of whom he or she would like to hire. Now, the unfortunate truth that I think not a lot of people want to talk about is if you don't necessarily fit that mold, then you might not stand a chance, right? I've had people that say, right, I would like to hire someone that comes from this particular background. I need someone that has worked for these particular companies. And I think that the point is that you can really you can really take it personally when you don't fit that mold. But for me, I think you need to focus your efforts on the things that you can control, which is finding the right people to be aligned with, being the best version of yourself, staying positive, not letting the job market and the rejections get you jaded, because that then has a downward spiral and a negative effect, and that then affects how you're projecting yourself when you do actually get an interview. So I think it's all about trying to control the things that you can control. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah.
I think
So
there's
true.
I think there's so much in a job search that we can't control. It's almost enough to send someone mad. And I think the trick is trying to ascertain between what you can control and what you can't, and doing your best. I know it's easier said than done, but doing your best to let go of the stuff that you can't control.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good advice. Very aligned to some of the advice that we give previously at ANZ about control. So you can only focus on things that you can control, but you can't keep dwelling on the things that you can't control. You just have to let go. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah.
it. I also think there's another thing here as well, which is a delicate subject, which is, and it kind of goes back into what we're talking about with adventure. One of the reasons why we focus on adventure and we do these adventurous pursuits is because it gives us different perspectives. It allows us to exercise resilience. It allows us to exercise all these things that ultimately make us more effective in our day-to-day job. And one of the things that I've noticed is that I'm definitely more effective in my job and in my career through the stuff that I've done outside. I would argue that if you find yourself in a position of redundancy, especially, the tendency can be to sit in front of your computer screen all day, every single day. And I've been in this position myself, just firing out as many job applications as you possibly can do, staring at that computer screen and slowly sending yourself mad because you're not getting anywhere. I think that having a distraction or having something that allows you to take a step back from that is that's not related to a job search, I actually think is incredibly important. And it's odd because it can feel indulgent. We all have families, we have mortgages to pay for. It can feel very counterintuitive to actually step away and go and do something like, go for a walk, or go for a run, or catch up with friends, or do something that's not related to it. But I think it's incredibly important. I would actually go as far as to say that I would prescribe it. I wouldn't recommend it when someone is in between jobs.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the sayings that we have, Maria, another one of the sayings that we have in our group is small world, big problems, big world, small problems, right? And it's this whole idea. I mean, your problems don't change inside, but it's how you view them. And it's, if your world is very, very small, your problems and everything can seem like it's bigger. The bigger that your world is, the wider your field of gaze, and the more the more perspective you have, the more equipped you can feel to deal with the issues in front of you.
Mm.
Excuse me.
Mm. Right. Thank you. I've got some notes in the chat as well. So true what you just said. Totally agree with you. I'll keep some of the questions towards the end. But just now, I'll probably relate to what you talk about, the people. So in some of our sessions, we talk about connections. So some of the people on the line today, as we mentioned, that some are looking for job, but some are in the job at the moment. So how can people effectively tap onto their connections to reach their next career destination? Any
Yeah,
advice that you can give?
yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple of things that I would say on that. I think from what I have witnessed over, the 2 decades of working in this space, is that the best networkers or collaborators, they don't necessarily have the largest networks, but they do have the strongest advocates. So I think they foster the genuine relationships they've got rather than, you know, being just a business card collector or ninja starring their own business card out. I'm obviously speaking metaphorically, right? I think a lot of what I see is people who enjoy the process of networking and collaboration for what it is, rather than looking at it in a sort of Machiavellian or self-serving way. I think it's about finding your tribe. It's about finding people who are aligned with how you think. Um, and it's about enjoying those conversations for what they are, right? Which is an opportunity to gain someone else's perspective, bounce ideas off them. All of the stuff, all of the opportunity will be a byproduct of just authentic connection, right? I see a lot of very insincere people who promote themselves as, you know, excellent networkers, whereas actually all they are people that are very good at having 2-minute face level conversations that ultimately leave people feeling quite vacuous. So for me, I think it's about finding who your people are and really just kind of nurturing those stuff, because I would take 5 genuine connections over 50, you know, face value ones. And I feel 5 genuine connections will help you find a job way more than 50 insincere ones, because we live in a fast-paced world. And if you have face level, if all of your relationships are at face value, people forget very quickly because they're very busy getting on with their own lives, right? And I think it's about having those honest and genuine ones and enjoying it for what it is, and I think that they're far more productive.
Yeah, can't agree more.
Yeah.
Recently, I've been speaking to a few people. They all say the same thing as well, and because of the genuine relationship that you have. And it's, oh, if I have a job, who should I reach out to? And ding, 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 they can think of the people that they can relate to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this goes into probably what we're going to talk about next, which is how I think people are scared to be their authentic self. I think the biggest criticism that I have of my candidates when they go to interview is that they are very scared to be authentic. They feel like it's a letting down of their guard, because there is certain things that you are allowed to say at interview or you aren't allowed to say at interview. And yes, there's always things within reason, but the one thing I always encourage is to try and be as much as your authentic self as you can do. Because um, I think two things. Number one, if you're your authentic self and someone doesn't like you, that job was never going to work anyway, and you will find yourself out of a job within 6 months. But number two, everyone says the same answers to questions, right? I hear the same answers over and over again. These are the answers that people think they should say, right? When you can tell that someone is speaking from the heart and they're being their authentic self, it actually hits completely differently, right? And all of a sudden they become so much more memorable. So I'm always trying to encourage people to kind of be as much of their authentic self as they can do, right? Because I think that makes you memorable, and in turn separates you from the herd.
Mm, yeah. Can just give you a like on the screen. So don't know whether you can see that. And just now you mentioned about what are the things that you can say or should ask during the interview. I know that recently you said that you spoke to a friend, and when you share that with him, and he said, "Oh, I didn't know that I can actually ask that or allowed to ask that." Are you able
Yeah.
to elaborate on that example?
Yeah, it was a friend I was speaking to last week who's in between jobs and he's kind of struggling. And we were talking about how all of the jobs in the job market at the moment are 10, 20 grand less than what he's been earning previously. And he was starting to feel a bit nervous because, you know, he's been out of a job now for 4 months, 5 months. And, you know, does he start to drop his salary expectations, or does he carry on? And the thing that I said to him was, well, why are you not having that conversation with your potential employer at interview stage? Doesn't necessarily have to be during that first interview, You know, interviewing is a process and it usually spans 2 or 3 meetings. But when it gets to the end of that, I really kind of encourage honest conversations around, hey, look, this is what I've been on in my salary before. I'm completely open to taking a step back to prove myself, right? But if I was doing so, I just want us to have a little conversation about what that maybe looks like in 12 months' time. And whether or not we can, you know, we can have that conversation at 12 months to say, hey, look, I've proven myself. I reckon I've proven so much more of my worth. You know, are we able to have that conversation to see if we can get back up to where I have been? Now, this might be something that everyone does, but I think he was shocked. He was like, I didn't know that I could have that conversation at an interview. I didn't know I could be that honest. And it was a surprise to me that he didn't feel like he could articulate these sort of very real and very kind of um, very, very sort of justified thoughts that were going on in his head. So I always think that the advice I give is that recruitment, I give 2 bits of advice. Recruitment nirvana should always feel like more of a conversation than it should an interview. It should be a back and forth. But I think there is an emphasis on you as a candidate to create that by asking questions, letting people know what's on your mind. There is a bit of a skill in it, right? Because you don't want to sound self-serving, but you definitely want to foster this thing where you're kind of having more of a conversation, right? You want to think of it more that you're at a networking event and you're just telling someone about yourself, right? But I also think that that goes with a little bit of an asterisk that the first interview should always be the opportunity where you park all of that and you just give the best version of yourself, right? I think the moment someone has decided that they like you and you'll be a good fit, I think a lot of those conversations become a lot easier. And I think you only get one chance at a first impression. And I think you should, in the first interview, you should always put your best foot forward, and it should always be about what you can do for that particular person. And then as the interview process goes on, I think it should become more about, well, this is what I want. These are the parameters. This is what really ignites me. This is what gets me going. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Hope that makes sense to everyone in the audience today. Some already giving you likes. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. We'd like to, we actually set up the form, and then there's one question that get asked in the form, in the pre-submitted question. And this one actually got asked quite a few times in the past. So, Martin, what advice can you give to an individual who is looking at a career change in a completely different industry, particularly when this person is of a mature age?
Yeah. Yeah, tricky. I think there are a couple of things, right? I think there's a couple of things that are probably unsaid in those scenarios. I think the first is that there is a probably wrong stereotype about certain attributes that people of a mature age have, right? And I'm speaking here not through my own personal view at all. I'm just speaking from what I've heard over the years. And that is that the further you get into your career, the less flexible you are in your thinking, right? I think that's why people love hiring grads. I think it's why people favor the young, is that when we're young, we're just more wired for flexibility and adaptability, and you can throw anything at them and, you know, people will just go off and they will do that. I think that the wrong preconception is that the longer you get into the career, the more fixed you become in your thinking. You know, I'm right, I won't listen to anyone else's thinking. So I think firstly, acknowledging that there's a certain percentage of if you are thinking about a transition in later on in your career, there may be that preconception. And actually just being aware of it, I think, is quite a liberating thing, right? And probably doing more than you usually would to demonstrate why you don't fit that mold. I think that I think the emphasis is probably on you to take the ball by the horns there and do that, because there will be a certain percentage, which will probably be 50% or more, that will have that preconception. And I think the other thing there is there probably has to be a little bit of flexibility on your part. And I know that everyone's in a different financial situation, but I do get a lot of people that say, well, I'm a project director and I get paid $250,000 a year. I want to change to be, an AI consultant with or something completely different, but my salary expectations are 250 grand a year. And I think there needs to be a bit of realism around how monetizable your skill set is into what you're moving in. So one of the things that I recommend is a slow transition rather than a 180 pivot. I recommend trying to do a bit of consulting work first, where you maybe work 30 hours a week and you can cover yourself, and then you can do some interning, um, and actually say to people, right, I'm happy to work for free for a short period of time to demonstrate my worth, right? But if it works well, I would expect a job offer at the end of it. Again, it goes back to presenting different options and being a bit more kind of flexible in your thinking and being a bit more solutions driven, because the people that you are interviewing with or the people that you're talking to probably haven't thought about that either. I think that there's a lot of linear thinking in hiring. I need this, so therefore I want someone that has done X, Y, and Z. And sometimes it takes you to say, hey, have you thought about this? How about I do 5 to 10 hours a week where and I'll do it unpaid for the first 2 months just to demonstrate a bit of value. How about I come in for 2 days next week, and I'll work for free, as a working interview. I think there's no set way in which these things go, but I think getting creative with how you do it, I think you'll be surprised at how receptive people are to that.
Mhm. You have a question?
Yeah, I do. I didn't want to type it, so I thought it's easier to talk through, if that's okay. No, thank you for the advice earlier. It was really great. My quick question is, how many supporters do we need to provide to the hiring manager? When I'm saying this is, I'll give you a bit of context of what I'm saying. I've applied for many roles recently, and all I'm been getting is rejections. Then I've done a different approach where I've contacted hiring managers and then see who they know, and then trying to support me along the way, that someone that has worked with me before to give me a good reference. How many is enough? And is there is a bit too much? Sometimes if I ask like 2 or 3 people, does it seem like too desperate for the job? I just want to get some insights in terms of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so the question is how many different avenues for the same job, or
Yes,
yeah,
for the same
okay.
job. For the same job
Yes.
for a hiring manager, because what I've been hearing is that one job could have 200 applicants. How do I actually get myself to be the top 5 just to get an
Yes.
interview? Not even
Yeah.
not even
Yeah.
asking for anything else, just the interview. That's all I'm getting. It's so hard. So
Yeah, firstly, I feel your pain. I think we are in a market at the moment. It should also be said at the moment, and I know this will be no new news to any of you, right? We're in a market where there are a lot of people that are out there at the moment, right? So I think just talking about that and acknowledging that is healthy in and of itself, because, if this were a market where no one was looking and you were still struggling to get interviews, that's a completely different conversation, right? There is there are some candidates at the moment who I have placed multiple times over the last 20 years, who I hold in the highest regard, who are struggling to get interviews. So firstly, it has absolutely no bearing on your own quality, right? Whether you're getting those meetings or not. But I would say it probably goes back to what I would say before. If I was looking for sponsors to get my foot in the door, I'd be going as senior as possible. I'd be going to the most senior person that you know and getting their genuine and heartfelt endorsement for a role. I think that the top-down approach always works. And I also think that some people are sometimes sheepish about asking, you know, a 2-up or a 3-up boss to endorse them. But I also think you'd be surprised how willing people are to sort of give you that time, right? If you do. So I would say, and this is obviously blanket, you know, there's not a one fits all approach to this, but I think if you've got someone that's really senior, I'd be going to them. But yeah, I think also if you're hiring and you have 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 different people saying, hey, this is the person that you should be hiring, there's probably something in your brain that's going to tell you that you should be hiring that person. So yeah, you know, I've done it in the past where I've asked 5 or 6 people in the same company to do it and it worked. So yeah, go for it.
Okay, no, that's good to hear, because I had a coffee catch up with the hiring manager's boss. So I went one higher because the other hiring manager's in Sydney. So
Yeah.
that's why I was just asking that question. Am I doing too much? Because I'm getting other people in the same company to give me that endorsement as well. So it's good to hear from that. Thank you.
Steve just made a point there about vulnerability, and if you haven't already realized, it's something that I'm quite big on. And I think, sorry to all the non-males out there, but it's especially hard for males to sometimes portray vulnerability or just wrestle with it as a concept. But I think as well, you need to be open to asking people whether or not they would be comfortable endorsing you, not just asking them if they will endorse you, because anyone will endorse you, right? But I think that there probably is a conversation before that, which is, hey, what do you think about me as a candidate? What's your feedback on me? Where do you think I'm best placed? Where do you think I'm good? And actually, how comfortable are you giving me a heartfelt endorsement? Because you don't know what those, if you just say, hey, can you endorse me for this job? You don't really know. You have no control over what that person is saying. But if you're asking them how they feel about you as a candidate and, you know, whether or not they would be comfortable and what they might say about you, then that gives you a whole new level of insight into, you know, how you are viewed. And I think there is this sort of tendency to maybe stick your head in the sand and sort of just say, hey, can you endorse me? And people will always say yes, because it's a lot easier to say yes and then do nothing than actually have a difficult conversation. But if you can create a safe space where you can get someone talking, you may find out a lot more about yourself, and you may find out about some stuff that you didn't know. And in turn, that person is actually going to feel more predisposed to help you, because people like to talk to people who have high levels of self-reflection and EQ, and, you know, people that can look inward and a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, totally resonate with that. Because it helps when, let's say, someone who's already in an organization, they spread the words as well about you, like when they endorse you, and then they also, when they talk to someone and endorse you, and then it just helps you in getting the job.
Absolutely.
We might go to some questions in the chat, so I'll go top down. So Eldrin asked a question, speaking of mindset, which you covered at the start, and with your vast experience in both life and career, how are you able to learn or understand or apply discernment and good judgment about a role, culture, or people?
I love that question. Yeah, I think that's an awesome question. I think the first thing is trust your gut. I think the amount of people that second guess themselves is really it's startling to me. But I think that, you know, buying a house, getting a new job, they are ultimately at their core gut feel decisions. And sometimes you might not be able to articulate it, but you've just got a gut feel. So I think firstly, trust yourself is a big bit of advice, right? I think you will always steer yourself right with that approach. But secondly, I would just ask questions, right? I would find out what's important to you, and I would ask those questions. If, you know, if a highly sociable environment is really important to you, I'd be asking that. You know, I think if you are someone that, you know, really requires a lot of nurturing, I'd be asking those questions as well. Again, I know these are sensitive subjects because you know, especially when you're out of a job, you can be really loath to show a side of you that could jeopardize you getting that job. But I think it comes down to how you're phrasing it. I think you can say, hey, look, I'm not someone that needs a lot of hand holding, but every now and again, I do really respond quite well to someone getting an arm around me. How do you feel about that? It's not a deal breaker for me, and it's certainly not something that you should be pinning everything on. It's just something I'm interested to hear, hey, I really enjoy sociable environments. Again, it's not a prerequisite. I'm just interested to understand, is there anything that the team's doing on a monthly basis? I think as long as you're sort of prerequisiting it so it doesn't sound like an ultimatum, I think you can always sort of slip in what you're trying to say at some point.
Thank you. And any advice for maintaining a role that's finally aligned for you? For example, what's the most important focus or priorities in your first 3 months when commencing a new role?
Yeah, I think that's also a great question. For me, I get this a lot. There is the number one priority that people look for, and I hear this year after year, role after role, in that first month is mindset. It's showing willingness to hit the ground running. You should never really be working harder than your first month in a job. It all comes down to that first good impression, right? If you go in and you don't set that first great impression, you are creating an uphill battle for yourself. If you go in, all you should be saying is absolutely, yes, I can do that. There should be no rocking of the boat. The one thing that managers look for in the first month or two is just the right mindset. It doesn't matter if you're a little rough around the edges. It doesn't matter if you might do something wrong here, or you might go off on the wrong approach there. If you demonstrate a genuine willingness, that is the most important thing, I would say. And that's the one bit of feedback that I always hear. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that need tweaking, but ultimately they're just completely in the right headspace. They're showing willingness, they're in the right mindset, and I can work with that. What I don't hear is, oh my God, they're obviously a genius, but they haven't, but they're not really showing willingness, and they've rubbed a couple of people up the wrong way, but they're so good that we're going to stick with them anyway. I don't hear that at all. So it all comes back to, yeah, just putting forward your best self in those first couple of months.
Yeah, and also building relationships with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but also I think trying to demonstrate delivery. I do think to a lesser extent, people do go in and it's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to spend my first 3 months just getting to know who's who in the zoo. I think really good people, they go in and they try and deliver on something, no matter how small, as quickly as they possibly can do, because that says a lot about who you are as an individual. So I think looking for where the low-hanging fruit is and seeing where the quick wins are and demonstrating value from day one, I think is a really, really important thing.
Yeah, good advice. Thank you. Cabaret just put a link there about sharing about the imposter syndrome. So thanks, Cabaret. I might jump into the next question Dominique asked. I feel that many companies are looking for candidates who have done the exact same role in the same industry, using the same technologies. How can experienced professionals secure an interview when they genuinely have the capability to perform the role successfully, but don't tick every single box in the job description?
Yeah, I agree with this. I think it's a major criticism of hiring managers, right? We need a Workday implementation project manager in a bank. I need someone that's done Workday implementations within a bank. And it is a mindset, and you're not imagining it, and it is real. I think, how do we navigate it? It can be hard if a manager has that fixed mindset. The first thing is if you've worked with that person before, and this is an obvious statement, if you've worked with that person before, they care less. The more they know you, the less that person cares about what you've done. They just want to know that you're a good person, you can get stuff done. And I see that all the time. I see a manager that will start and say, hey, I need this very, very specific skill set. And then all of a sudden they go, hey, I hired someone, and I look at their skills and I'm like, yeah, but they haven't done anything of what you actually said in that brief. And they go, yeah, but I worked with them before. And so I know that they can deliver. So I think it does come back to keeping yourself front of mind for the people that you have worked with in the past. But I also think that there is a little mindset about what they actually mean, right? So I think if someone's talking about having someone from a banking background, usually that doesn't mean that they need someone from a banking background. It usually means that they want someone that can navigate, highly regulated industries and work within work within a particular way. So I wish I had an answer to that. I really do. It's a frustration of mine. Just not let it get you down, because people do have that mindset. They will all start with that mindset, and they might not finish with it. So I don't know. Yeah, sorry. I wish I had a better answer for it. I'm really sorry. There's no silver bullet.
Yeah, that's all right. And thanks, Lydia, for posting. Just now we talk about the routine outside of job searching.
Yeah.
Lydia has
Actually,
put
sorry,
some.
Maria, just while I think
Yeah,
about that, I'm sorry, just
yeah,
while I think about that, the consultants in the forum may agree with this as well. I would say people that have consulting backgrounds generally tend to care less about that stuff. I find the more diverse a background someone has had, the less they generally tend to care, because they don't have that background themselves. So, maybe seeking out, or maybe trying to find people that have come from consulting backgrounds that have a history of turning their lens to whatever is in front of them is probably a practical piece of advice that you can try and seek out.
yeah. Cool. And another question, coming from undesirable work environment and people, how do you break the glass ceiling and heal or unlearn past traumas when it comes to taking a leap of faith into going for new roles or industries?
Yeah. I mean, putting yourself in an ocean rowing boat and turning your nose to the horizon and being with your own thoughts without any signal for 35 days is a really good way to get in your own head and actually deal with past trauma. I think it's one of the things I talk about is the power of adventure, or the power of self-challenge, as a key and a tool to living a mentally healthy life, and exercising resilience and stuff like that. So my advice I'm not a psychologist, right? And I'm certainly not someone in that state, but for me, self-challenge, and it doesn't have to be adventure, it could be anything, but finding something that you are genuinely unsure if you are capable of doing, putting a plan in place, setting out, and then achieving that, and proving yourself wrong and proving yourself more capable than you think, I think is one of the healthiest things that you can actually do in life. I think that it has repercussions in terms of your mental fitness, your resilience, your ability to deal with complex situations within the workforce. It increases your ability to deal with toxic work cultures, hard bosses. I just think it makes you a better rounded person. And one of my keynote speeches that I give is that the sort of growth that you are seeking in the workplace can often be found in completely other areas than you never thought to look. I think one thing that we're really guilty of is, right, I need to get ahead in my career. I need to break through the glass ceiling. Right, I'm going to go off and do an MBA. I'm going to do another course on AI. We walk further into the belly of the beast, and it becomes a bit of an echo chamber. Whereas I think if we are widening our field of gaze and looking for other areas and looking in those places which are really uncomfortable. I've got a friend who, has just done an open mic night. He learned guitar 6 months ago, and he's experiencing exactly the same things and the same enlightenment that I'm experiencing by running 252 kilometers across the Saharan desert. And it is about self-challenge, and I think that you can find a lot of that stuff by challenging yourself in other areas. Again, it feels, I think for a lot of people, it feels like an indulgence, especially when you throw family, the need to provide, all that kind of stuff. Life can feel busy, but for me, it's not a recommendation, it's a prescription. I think that having a multifaceted life where you are challenged and you can find challenge and you can overcome that challenge, I think is the absolute key to getting, working your way up the ladder and also having a more fulfilled and a more enriched life.
Mm. Yeah.
Sorry if that sounds really preachy. I'm really sorry. People may disagree with me on that one. It's just it's a personal ethos.
No, that's great advice. The next question, the next one is a comment. I think just now related to what you mentioned about working for free. So it feels unfair that we should be expected to work for free in order to get somewhere through. But I probably just tapping on that. I've got a great example of someone who is my friend's son, who was a fresh graduate, actually going into an internship to work for free, and now he basically, before he finished the internship, they actually gave him a role. So I'll say congratulations on that. So it was a great example of going into work and learn, and then they get a job.
I agree. It is unfair. I think that it's the reality that we live in, and I think we can fight that or we can accept it for what it is. But also, anyone that's ever started a new business that ultimately went on to become successful had to start working for free. I think it's about a shift in mindset. I think that it's very rare that we are able to take one step or two steps forward or a giant step sideways towards something that we want to do without having to take half a step back. If it ends up happening, then brilliant. But I think lowering our expectation to what we will probably have to do, I think it is probably a more healthier way to look at it, because it stops you from feeling resentful about the process, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree. I do agree. It is unfair. It really is. I completely agree with the sentiment.
Eldrin asked a question just when you mentioned about your keynote, the growth in other areas of life can help you in your career. Do you have that link that you can share with us?
I don't have a recording of it, but I can send a link to my speaker page and my personal website, which kind of talks more about that stuff. Yeah, absolutely. I do a lot of keynote speaking with corporates around that stuff.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'll share that. I'll share that with you.
All right. Thank you. We don't have any questions in there. I know we have 4 minutes left. So before we jump into the final, is there anyone that want to ask a quick questions? Feel free to go on mute.
I'll probably ask a lot of questions, but I'll just keep it short. In terms of the marathon, why did you just something out of the blue? Why did you do 5 marathons in the main course of it? Maybe I missed it, but
yeah,
apologies.
Six marathons in 5 days. It's part of a race. It's called the Marathon des Sables. It's supposed to be the hardest foot race on earth. And the reason I did it was before signing up to that marathon, the furthest that I'd run was a failed attempt at the City to Surf. So I believe that every single person, and I don't believe that I'm special in any way, and that's why I started that by saying, if you want to talk to an elite athlete, you're barking up the wrong tree, mate. But I think we are all built for so much more. I think we all have massive amounts of untapped capability. I think the two things that stop us are the process, which can be boring, arduous, and hard. And I also think that there's this sort of aversion to risk and fear. I think that what happens with a lot of us, and I was certainly this person, but a lot of us, we would do something that scares us, and when that first wave of fear or discomfort hits, we do an about turn and we run away from it. Whereas actually what I've learned in doing these things is if you can sit with that and reassess and examine why you're feeling that, and then you can find a way to push on through, you realize that layer of fear was just a thin veneer, and actually what lies beyond it is, untapped capability and, and a lot of other stuff that you probably never had access to in the past.
There are a few comments in the chat and a great session today, Martin. I know you have a hard stop at 1 o'clock.
Yes, sorry, I'm going to have to dive off now. I really apologize because I could speak about this stuff for ages. I'm really sorry.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. We have no further questions in the chat, but we just want to thank Martin so much for carving your time. I know you're very, very busy. And then I know that when I first spoke to you, you just had your heart of helping the community. So really, thank you so much for coming here to speak with us. And for those who are on the line, feel free to connect with Martin. I know Martin is also having placement in the jobs and all that. So look out for the roles that he's hiring. The video recording will be made available on school and on our YouTube in the next few days. So thank you again, Martin, and have a rest of.
And also, Maria, if you want me to, jump back on, if there's another session that is more practical around, a bit more linear, I'm well aware that this was quite existential and, emotionally driven. But if there's another session around practical tips, just let me know. I'm happy to jump back on.
Yeah. I'd like to probably get the feedback from the people on the line. Like, what's the next step that people want to hear more? But thank you so much, Martin, and everyone have a great weekend and great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.